I want no part in it. The hysterical debate over Silicon Valley's next big thing. It's not a scam, one Silicon Valley venture capitalist insisted when I inquired about Bird, the electric scooter startup whose valuation has multiplied exponentially, from $300 million in March to a staggering $1 billion at the end of May, and is now seeking another round of funding at a seemingly preposterous $2 billion valuation. Bird boosters contend that the two-wheeled contraptions are the future of transportation, a fast, cheap, city-friendly alternative to ride-hailing services, and one that could become wildly profitable. I have never seen revenue grow this fast in an early-stage startup. Ever, one particularly enthusiastic investor told me last month. At the same time, the venture capitalist continued, I certainly don't think there's any way this company's worth $2 billion. In the strange, early life of a hot Silicon Valley startup, marketing can be as consequential as reality. Early-generation tech startups, after all, often competed based on technology and engineering alone. Now, investors are increasingly looking at companies that seize on cultural trends in catchy ways. And Bird fits a couple of Silicon Valley erogenous zones. It's a company predicated on mass urbanization, and one that focuses on, as investors put it, the last mile, right to your destination, closing the potentially lucrative gap between commuters' homes and public transportation, or between the parking lot and the office. Uber and Lyft have already begun competing in the bike-sharing space. Indeed, venture capital firms are reacting lustily. A $15 million Series A round was followed by a $100 million cash injection led by Index Ventures in March, and $150 million from Sequoia Capital just 2 months later at a $1 billion valuation, elevating Bird to bona fide unicorn status. According to Axios' Dan Primick, Bird is now seeking another $200 million in new funding at double that valuation. The Financial Times, which also reported on the new funding round, pegged Bird's pre-money valuation at closer to $1.5 billion. Bird could, of course, become a large-scale company and an acquisition target for organizations as seemingly varied as ride-sharing, logistics, and retail companies. Meanwhile, the company also happens to be ubiquitous in regions where VCs tend to congregate. The sudden preponderance of Bird scooters in San Francisco and Los Angeles has created a cottage industry of people who collect and charge Bird scooters, known as bird hunters. A group of birders is called a flock. We're not going to be happy till there are more birds than cars, CEO Travis van der Zanden, a former executive at Lyft and Uber, said in an interview earlier this year, in what was surely meant as a boast but sounds a little like a threat. Indeed, the vigor expressed by Bird enthusiasts may be matched only by the company's detractors, who have condemned the scooters as a plague, a nuisance, and even an existential danger. It's Wheelmajid, one San Francisco resident told me in April. They are everywhere. People are zooming past pedestrians without a single fuck to give. If I'm being honest, it feels like a short-term trend. It already feels like a lot of the FOMO-stricken players who missed out on companies like Airbnb or Uber. Whether scooters are the vehicle of the future, or just another metaphor for bi-coastal navel-gazing, is an open question in Silicon Valley. Doesn't it feel like the Uber heyday all over again? On some level, I get it, but also, I want no part in it, one investor told me. There's liability issues, regulatory issues. Others wonder whether Bird's vertigo-inducing ascent is merely a reflection of industry groupthink, or worse. Bird may be popular among yuppies in large cities, but will it really scale around the world? Will it work in countries with challenged electrical grids, or in places where populations don't view commuting as an experience worthy of upspending for pleasure, or to create an experience? If I'm being honest, it feels like a short-term trend, a third investor said. It already feels like a lot of the FOMO-stricken players and firms who missed out on companies like Airbnb or Uber are diving in. Others are skeptical about whether Bird and oppose S valuation denotes anything at all. In Silicon Valley, after all, math is less important than intangibles like vision. And when $1 billion can become $1.5 billion, or even $2 billion, in a matter of weeks, you've entered a world of abstraction. What is the value of any startup? Mark Sister, a managing partner at Upfront Ventures and the scooter skeptic turned bird investor who insists it's not a scam, mused philosophically, reflecting on Bird's valuation. The value is what is the future economic potential of this company, and I look at the data and it's undeniable. Alex Wilhelm, who runs Crunchbase News, was more dismissive. You can wave your hands enough to make the $400 million valuation make some sense, he wrote last month, when Bird joined the 3 Club. But at the end of the day, he pointed out, Bird is a physical product